Attorney General Nessel. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started here. So, Attorney General Nessel, I appreciate your time. I'll start off broad, and I want to just ask you, what's kind of your reaction to everything going on right now in Minneapolis? Obviously, we've seen the protests. We've had, two American citizens who have been shot and killed at the hands of immigration enforcement. What's kind of your initial reaction to all of this?
This is a very disturbing set of circumstances, and it's nothing that I've ever seen before. I've been a practicing attorney since 1994, and for at least the last 25 years of it, I've dealt with specifically officer-involved shootings, use of excessive force, people who died in detention, and I've not seen anything like what we're seeing right now in regard to how the federal government is handling their responsibilities involving immigration enforcement. It's really concerning to me.
How do you think they should handle it? We heard yesterday Border Czar Tom Homan, he said that he wants to come up with a plan to get those ICE agents out of there and to wind down those operations. Do you think that's the most reasonable path forward? What do you think about that?
I mean, let's have a frank conversation about what it is the federal government wants. Remember, the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, said, "We will de-escalate and will remove these ICE agents if you turn over your voter roll data." So, what is this really about? Is it about keeping communities safe in Minnesota, or is it about Minnesota having to violate state and federal law by providing information to the federal government that they're not even allowed to provide, so that then the Department of Justice or the federal government can use it to potentially undermine elections which are run by the state? So, forgive me if I am a little bit in disbelief as to the thought that you need these thousands and thousands of ICE agents or CPB agents in Minneapolis to keep those communities safe when the deal that they're trying to strike is turn over all your personal information to the federal government and then we'll leave. That's what it's really about. But what deeply concerns me is this: the way in which the federal government has behaved, it's putting civilians at risk, but it's also putting police at risk as well, you know? And what we're seeing from these federal agents is that they are not acting in concert with the types of policies and protocols and expertise that, people deserve to have from law enforcement. And traditionally we have had. So they don't have the vetting of regular departments. They don't have the training, and they're not following the same policies and protocols. And if I could be more specific about it, these officer-involved shootings, uh, the agents are not behaving the way that they normally are in terms of the circumstances in which they're actually shooting and killing a civilian. They're not staying on the scene the way they should. They're not providing medical assistance in accordance with regular protocols. They're not collecting evidence the way they normally would or interviewing witnesses. We're seeing agents that will, conduct a shooting of a civilian and then they just get in their cars and leave. I've never seen that in all the years that I've been practicing and been reviewing officer-involved shootings. It's a very, very unusual set of circumstances. And so, what I would like to say to people here in Michigan is that I want people to know I hope nothing like this happens here. But if it does, the Department of Attorney General, in concert with state, county, local law enforcement, we are going to conduct a parallel investigation, because at this point it's really hard to trust that the federal government is going to do a proper investigation. We handle every single officer involved shooting for state police all across the state of Michigan, and we're very transparent about how we do that. We make all the information available to the public. Clearly, the federal government doesn't plan on doing that. So I want to assure people we're going to be doing that here. But I also want to caution local law enforcement about what their relationships are or aren't with, ICE and with the CPB and Homeland Security. And that's to say this: if you are working directly with the feds on immigration enforcement specifically, you may be putting yourself at great risk. Not only do you have a situation where these agents are acting irresponsibly, and it could be a threat to local law enforcement, But there could be liability on the part of these police departments if you are detaining somebody who should not be rightfully detained. If you have a prisoner in your custody or a detainee in your custody, and the feds come in and they use excessive force, you're going to get sued as well. So when you have the federal government acting irresponsibly, unfortunately, that's going to bleed over into local law enforcement, not to mention the fact, of course, that, you know, people in communities around the state, who have great relationships in many instances with their local law enforcement or their county sheriff, um, those relationships, we're seeing them being really eviscerated because people are conflating the actions of federal law enforcement and immigration officers with local law enforcement. And the other thing I want to say about that is this: every minute that our state and local law enforcement spend working on immigration enforcement, which is not their regular job, they're not responding to a domestic violence call. They're not responding to an accident or somebody who's having some sort of a medical emergency, because they're helping the feds do their job, which is not traditionally the job of state and locals. And I hear over and over again how all of our police departments are short-staffed and under-resourced. So I don't understand how they have the time to do immigration enforcement work if they don't have enough personnel to do just their regular jobs. So those are all concerns that I have, but we are asking for departments to review their policies to see if they are placing their local municipal government at risk with their partnerships that they may or may not have with federal immigration law enforcement.
I want to ask you too, as you know, Attorney General Nessel, politics right now, they're so divisive. You do have folks who are saying, hey, these immigration laws, they need to be enforced. What's kind of your reaction to that?
Well, clearly we need to have immigration enforcement, and I'm not contesting that. But first of all, let's look at the people who now have been detained and deported. Out of the thousands that we've seen since Trump has been back in office just a year ago, 75% of them have no criminal history or record at all. And out of those who do, I mean, we're talking about only 7% of the total number of people that have violent criminal histories. So, in terms of making communities safer, I would push back on that. I would contest it and say I think they're making our communities fundamentally less safe because you have people who are scared all the time, and we have people who are like they're not taking their kids to school or to doctor's appointments. You have crime victims that aren't coming forward because they're afraid, and so you have crimes that are going uninvestigated and unsolved. And so all of this together, it's making our communities fundamentally less safe in order to apprehend what is really only a handful of people who have violent criminal histories. And also traditionally, let's look at how that's been done. If you are, suspected or charged with something serious, right? Like an armed robbery or a sexual assault or a homicide, traditionally what we want to do is the state wants to, prosecute those cases, and we want people going to prison in most instances for that. If you just have ICE come in and instead they just take somebody who's wanted on one of those offenses and deport them, first of all, it's not really fair to the victim who doesn't see any justice. Secondly, they'll, might go on to continue to commit more crimes wherever they're located, but also they could come back to Michigan and re-victimize people. If we get the opportunity to prosecute them here, at least we know that they're going to be in the Michigan Department of Corrections where they can't hurt anybody. So it doesn't even make sense to me from that perspective. And traditionally, what we've done is the person, gets tried, they're convicted, they're sentenced, and at the end of their sentence, then they get deported. But at least in the meantime, we know where they are and we know they're not hurting anyone.
Yeah, and if I may too, two other topics. I know your office has addressed both of these in recent days, so I just want to follow up. I know a federal judge, and correct me if I'm wrong, blocked the Trump administration from basically saying you cannot file a lawsuit against these fossil fuel companies. I know your office recently filed a lawsuit against a number of companies. I guess what do you think about that ruling from the judge? I know you put out a release saying that you were pleased with that decision, right?
Well, it was a ridiculous lawsuit. I mean, to file a case preemptively against my department saying, hey, we don't know who the defendants are going to be in a lawsuit. We don't know what your claims are going to be, but you're not allowed to file a lawsuit. I mean, it's a total infringement, of course, on our 10th Amendment state sovereignty. And to me, I mean, it's sanctionable. It's so ridiculous. And it's embarrassing for the Department of Justice to be filing cases like that.
And Attorney General Nessel, before I let you go, I know the Senate recently passed legislation that you've been a big supporter of to combat human trafficking. Kind of just explain this legislation and why you feel it's needed.
Well, I mean, listen, there's so many different bills that I would need an entire additional segment for that. But we've been trying to get this legislation through for multiple terms. I am so glad that the Senate is taking it seriously. I believe that all of the proposed bills passed unanimously. Every single Democrat, every single Republican. I think people are beginning to really understand how dangerous human trafficking is and how prevalent it is, and we need better laws to address it. So I'm excited to have this go on to the House, and I hope that they will take it with the same amount of seriousness and that it'll pass through there and land on the governor's desk soon. We're long overdue for that.
Attorney General Nessel, I appreciate your time. Anything else you want to add? Anything I might have missed?
Yeah, I think I wanted to just have some basic pointers for civilians who are out there and who are worried about some of these ICE or CPB activities. Just to say this, first of all, you have every right to be able to document things using your phone camera. But we just want to make sure, firstly, that when you're doing that, that you're keeping track of like time and date and the location that you're at so that that documentation can be most helpful. But we also want to make sure people are not interfering with law enforcement operations because by doing so, they could get themselves in trouble. And we don't want to see people getting arrested during the course of them trying to document these activities. And also, I want to make sure that if you're following a law enforcement vehicle, an ICE agent or what have you, please remain a safe distance away from them. And again, don't impede with their activities. And just to remind people of their basic rights, law enforcement isn't allowed to just grab your phone because they don't like that you're videotaping them. And they can't enter your house or your home or your building without a valid search warrant. What we're seeing sometimes now is that there will be a document that's only been signed by that federal agency, but not by a magistrate or judge. It's not a lawful document that allows you to enter a space like that. So people should be aware of what their rights are, but also their obligations. And above all, I just want to make sure that, people who are interacting with these agencies are doing so in a way that they're safe.
Actually, I do have one more question because I just got a push alert. Some news that just came down. The Justice Department has opened a federal civil rights probe into the shooting death of Alex Pretti. I'm sure you're hearing that for the first time. Just kind of your thoughts.
It's about time. When I talk about how they are not following their usual practices, time was every single solitary officer involved shooting would be fully investigated by the DOJ's Department of Civil Rights. Um, to tell you just how out of step, ICE and CPB has been with normal, practices. We heard directly from ICE that the very next day, those same agents that actually committed the shooting were back at work, that they were back in the streets. That's not normal policy. Even in the most justified shooting you can imagine, there is a whole psychological review that officers are supposed to go through. It's very traumatic, no matter what the circumstances are, when you, as a law enforcement agent, kill someone. And so you're supposed to be, put on administrative leave so that you can, make sure that you're okay and you're in the right frame of mind to go back to work. So the thought that these people were just back at work the next day, and nothing to see here, obviously was very disturbing. I'm grateful that this is going to be, I hope, properly investigated, but I will say this, I think with that, for a proper investigation, they should be allowing the Minnesota Department of Attorney General to also review all of the evidence and to come to their own conclusions as well. It's not unusual to have joint task forces where these cases are being investigated together, they ought to allow that in this situation as well.
Attorney General Nessel, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.